Today we welcome Katie Bonawitz, Dan Swensen, Geri, Patty Paulson, and myself, all faculty in the Education Department, as they share the project of incorporating professional learning community models and integrating professional development days over the course of a semester for teacher candidates. Okay, Katie?
Good morning and welcome to our session. We'll be presenting to you today on professionalism in action. We will be taking this presentation to Las Vegas next week to the National AACTE Conference, which is the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Educators. So I'm Katie Bonawitz, and the expertise I bring to our team is in the area of special education.
Dan Swensen, my areas of expertise are technology and mathematics.
I'm Geri, and I work with social studies education.
Patty Paulson, I do the science education at Bethel.
Rasmussen, literacy.
So we're going to start with the who, but the who for this audience is very short, but I do want to give you a couple pieces of information that you might not know. Bethel Education Department graduates approximately 50 elementary education majors each year, and I also want to share our mission, which is preparing caring and competent teacher leaders, candidates, for pre-K-12 public and private schools.
All right, well, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what Block 2 means. That's a term that's very familiar to all of us. But when you are an education major at Bethel, you will experience multiple field experiences and practicums in various schools. And the Block 2 semester comes right before student teaching. So often the second semester of your junior year or the fall semester of your senior year. And during your Block 2 semester, it's an 18-credit block. And we get to capitalize on all the hours in your day in teaching you these various methods courses, as well as having you spend 350 hours in the schools. So our students are often in the schools every day of the week, with the exception of Friday. And they spend half the day in the school and half the day on campus taking different courses with our team. And the residency model we offer to some of our Block 2 candidates. It's an application process, and those students would stay in the Block 2 classroom there and in the fall and remain in that classroom in the spring for their student teaching. So they would have a full year in one classroom in the school setting. We are a great team. We collaborate wonderfully together, and we're excited to share with you about the things we've experimented with the last few years.
In terms of the why and the conceptual framework, I'm sort of going to divide it into three areas. The first thing we started was we looked at the data. We wanted to see what some of the gaps were in our Block 2 experience. And some of the data we looked at were the student teaching surveys, both from the supervising teachers and the cooperating teachers. We also looked at student surveys. The students take a survey at the end of the student teaching experience. And then in addition to that, alumni take surveys at 1 year and 5 years. So this is some of the data we looked at. So once we looked at the data, we identified some gaps. And some of these gap areas we addressed in the PD days that you're going to hear about, but we also addressed some of them in the content areas between the five of us. Some of the gap areas that were identified were classroom management issues, differentiation, cultural responsiveness, educational technology, and working effectively with ELs. The second thing you see up there is once we sort of saw those gaps, we looked at the standards, and we started with what Minnesota requires for us in terms of preparing teacher candidates. Those are called the Minnesota Standards of Effective Practice for Teachers. But we also wanted to go beyond that, so each of us looked in our content areas both at state and national standards. For example, in my case, I looked at the ISTE standards, which are national standards for educational technology, and the NCTM in mathematics. And so we each wanted to look at our national state standards to sort of go beyond what was expected by Minnesota in terms of preparing teacher candidates. And finally, you see the term backpack to briefcase. That sort of was the idea of modeling and giving opportunities to help students see themselves as professionals, not just students. And we did this by using the professional traits of educators as our guide.
What we really wanted to be very intentional about is, first of all, modeling an actual professional development day in the schools. That was very important to us, that the teachers, our pre-service teachers, should feel like real teachers. So during that day, we are part of their groups, we participate with them, and it is very much collegial interaction going on. We wanted to model everything as we teach. Novel idea. So things like backward design, where everything that we were doing was very intentional from an outcome, how we'd assess it, and then how we'd act on those assessments. So when you look at our overview of the day, each time we did it as close as possible to the same each of the 3 days. So the outcomes, essential questions, and how they'd be assessed, an overview of the day, and then the closure and ticket out the door has to tie back to the outcomes.
We also wanted to make maximum use of the professional development days. That's really what the focus of this presentation is. And our intent was really to have take advantage of the face-to-face component that we had on each of those 3 professional development days. So in order to do that, we flipped all 3 days, and by that I mean students were responsible for picking up content pieces before they actually showed up for the professional development day. So we had 3 real ways of flipping content. One of them was we would have certain assigned readings. They could be journal articles, they could be chapters out of books. We also used videos pretty extensively, and we used narrated PowerPoints. The one thing that we've learned about flipping is it's one thing to tell students to do something before they come to class or come to professional development days, but we've really discovered that it helps to have some accountability measures there. So in each of the professional development days, when we flipped them, we made it very clear to students what they needed to be ready to do when they showed up at the professional development day. And typically at the start of each day then, we would really process what it is that students had read, what they had viewed, and so forth. And I honestly don't think we've had a student yet that showed up that hadn't really kind of taken advantage of that flip component. And they came ready with notes and ready to talk and ready to engage. So the flip part is really critical. On a day that goes from 9 until 4, you cannot lecture for that amount of time. So the flipping part was really essential for us.
Probably the last 20 years, one of the biggest moves within schools for professional development has been professional learning communities. That is, we don't stand and deliver professional development, but they have opportunities to discuss and interact with other teachers. So we made that very intentionally centered to each of these days. And each activity involved a professional learning community. We were all a part of them, but it wasn't like we were sitting asking them questions. We were entering into the dialogue. We were saying things like, I wonder about, did you think about it? You know, I kind of thought about it. And so it was very much equal playing fields within those professional learning communities, and a lot of fun for us.
One of the philosophies of our professional development days is we want shared leadership of those days, and that leadership is shared among the 5 of us. What we found works pretty well is for individuals of us to take primary responsibility for a certain day. For example, on the lesson design day, I take primary responsibility for that. But then everything that happens during that day is shared among my colleagues here as well. And then we also really want to share that leadership with students too. So students actually are running part of the days that we have as well too. So it's been a major part of our philosophy. We, like I said, when we have these days that run from 9 to 4, you can't lecture the whole time. So to have multiple learning strategies is really key. What we found is that we never typically want students to be sitting more than 15, 20 minutes just listening to something, but if we do have those components, it's followed up with some type of activity. We had some activities that were standard across the 3 days, and then we had some that were really unique, to what was going on that particular day. As we continue the presentation here, you're going to hear a little bit more about what some of those activities are. But typically, you can see where the kind of where the yellows area are. You're going to get a feel for some of the different activities that happen. But we're going to elaborate on those more. They tend to be fun too, which is fun for students.
Just one added note on this slide, another part of our leadership on these days is bringing in a K-12 partner, and you'll see one of the names up here. This Amy is one of our former students and is now a coordinator at a charter school, and she comes in and presents map data from her school, and our students then get to analyze it. Math data is reading and math assessment data.
As you'll see when we go through these 3 days in just a minute, it's a gradual release. The first one is a little bit more structured, and the next one a little bit more student involvement, and the last one much more open kind of thing as they assume that professional role toward the end of the semester. And that's really fun for us to watch their growth and then to see it carried on into the classroom. But what we want to model in each of those is that ticket out the door. So we ask them to reflect going back to the outcomes, what their take-homes for that day was. And hopefully that they will model it as well. And then we ask for the feedback. What worked well for you? What might be improved? And then we have a Likert type scale on the day. And that's the data we've been collecting and the one that we've used as a reflective time of what can we change, what can we make better. For the most part, the students are phenomenal in being thankful and grateful for the opportunity. But other things that we wouldn't pick up on, like more frequent breaks, they help us remember.
The first day of each semester, professional development day, is typically one that focuses on lesson planning. So I'm just going to talk you through kind of one typical day, and then you're going to hear a little bit about the assessment day we do, and then the differentiation day as well too. We've got a lot of students here, which is great. So when we finish up, if you have questions about any of this, that'd be wonderful. We've got a few faculty members here too, but if you have questions about how this design of professional development days might be used, in your program, we're open to that as well too. So at some point we'll quit talking and we'll have time for questions too. But in terms of the lesson plan day, we have a heavy focus on backward design right from the start. What we've noticed with students is that they often come with a variety of experience with the writing objectives, and what we try to do is get something to standardized a little bit. So we're speaking a common language when we talk about writing objectives. What is Bloom's taxonomy and so forth. We also are of the opinion that there's no one magical way to design a lesson. Even though some of us may think so, we kind of don't think that now. I was a big Madeline Hunter person at the start, and I've come to appreciate a lot of other lesson designs. But what we have found is that there are some real common attributes that you can find between a lesson that might be designed with Hunter or another particular style or another particular style. So what we do is we really focus on those attributes, and then we do get down to the nitty-gritty of how might you write this particular kind of lesson or this lesson as well too. And one of the activities that we use to do that is what we call a fishbowl activity, and it's a real fun one. What we do as faculty is we sit in a big circle. The students come around us, just kind of hover around the outside, and they listen to a professional conversation that we have. And as a team, we're making a case for this is a really important attribute, and somebody might say, yeah, I agree it is. And what we try to do is get all those attributes laid out as we have these eavesdroppers around the outside. Then what we have students do at that point is think about each of those attributes, and they actually build out a concept map. You can see on the bottom right a student doing that. So those are all the individual attributes, and they start thinking about how these fit together. How might these really inform, a well-designed lesson? In the afternoon, then we start getting into more specifics. So we'll get into a Hunter design. We get into something that we call 5E, which is used in science. Dan does some work with math. Then eventually we start bringing in a lot of differentiation things as well too. When we do this particular thing, we actually work with stations. So students are rotating between different groups, And what they're doing is brainstorming together with us an initial lesson. We scaffold the whole experience, so at the start it's fairly simple. We're providing a lot of support, and then students, as the semester unfolds, go on to build out lessons of these different types then.
Students come from such a variety of backgrounds that assessments may be nothing more than multiple choice tests for them. So we really want to get some sort of common understanding of all the forms of assessment. I'm now calling it Big E, Little E. The Big E summative assessment, the Little E formative assessments. And so what are all those formative assessments we do to inform instruction, and then how do we do summative kind of assessments? And as you can see, we work very collaboratively in this. We start out with what we call a PIN activity, just to get a formative assessment of our students' positive, interesting, and negative experiences with assessment that we can come back to throughout the day with. And then as Katie already mentioned, we look at map data. That's part of the NWEA. That's a nationwide assessment that schools use. But schools use it to inform their instruction. So we want our students to be comfortable doing that when they enter the schools. So again, this is in our PLCs. And we also, you'll notice throughout the 3 days, use word walls. So all that academic language they have to know. We model, it's in big cards around, we have them use it multiple times, and so when they do their final teacher performance, they can bring that academic language in as well. Okay? And as we mentioned from the very beginning when Dan said we looked at those gaps, one of them was that equity-based. How do we do culturally responsive? We know there's a lot of bias in assessment. There's good data on that. So how do we use that? And so we worked again in PLCs. By the way, those PLCs are different each of the 3 days, so it's never the same click. It's always different. And really look at putting a lens on what kind of bias there is. We know the obvious, but it's the subtle ones that are a problem. And then in the end, we do a transdisciplinary model where we take a scenario, it happens to be the pond on the school property is polluted, and we take it from a social studies perspective, a language arts perspective, a mathematics perspective, and a science perspective, and the students have to design a task that would match that, and then do a checklist, a quality checklist that actually has quality indicators in it that goes with it. And again, they rotate among the 4 of us with those content areas, and we provide feedback as we work through developing it together. So it's proven to be a interesting way for them to look how things come together.
And our third day is on differentiation, and as we go through the semester, we're scaffolding everything. So lesson planning talked a little bit about differentiation. Jay mentioned that in each of the days, all of us play a role, and so on the lesson planning day, I've been bringing in different things on accommodations and modifications, same thing with assessment. So we're overlapping all the way through the semester. On this particular day, we really get into not only what is differentiation, but what does the brain tell us about differentiation, and digging into some of that research. So part of the morning is we start at the lower end of Bloom's in the morning with some of the definitions, and we get into some Kagan activities and get you moving right away in the morning to really practice those terms, define them. What does it mean? Can I tell you? Can you tell me what they mean? We then move into some mind mapping where students have, in the flip part of this day, they have been preparing for what differentiation is, and now they're getting together with their PLC to really draw it out, to design it. What is this? What does it mean to our PLC? How can we describe this to our peers? When we're done with that, the students do a carousel roundup where they're going around to all of them to see what did my peers pull apart with this mind map compared to what my group did. And it's really a great way to see our students analyzing that information that they have been learning about. We then have station rotations, and this is another part of FLIP where they have watched 5 videos prior to the differentiation day, and those 5 videos are anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes long on different content. So we will have a math, we will have a literacy, we'll have a responsive classroom. We'll have a variety of videos. You come back and in your PLCs, which also include a faculty member, you're breaking down that information. So we're really getting to that synthesis level of taking information and synthesizing it with what our students are experiencing in their practicum classrooms. The afternoon of our differentiation day, we pulled in the EDTPA, and the EDTPA is a required assessment that all of our teacher candidates complete during their final semester in the program. And we're using this time to bring all of the pieces together. And so there is a component on the EDTPA that relates to differentiation, but we use that so that a faculty can be working with a group of 5 students very closely on taking that and breaking it apart and pulling it all together. We also, the end of the day focuses on students designing their own classroom and taking all of the pieces, bringing them together, and really focusing when they design that classroom, not only what are all the bells and whistles and great things I can put into it, but making sure they're using academic language and the brain research to tell us why that classroom looks the way it looks. So as you heard from Patty, our ticket out the door is a really important part of our day to get our students reflecting back on what were our objectives and what did they take away from this day. What we do as faculty is, as exhausting as it is at the end of that day, we immediately sit down, even just for 20 minutes, to say, let's look at what the students said today so that it's fresh on our minds. And we take that and we start tweaking it, if need be, for the next semester that we'll run this. That has been very valuable, and then we always have another follow-up, probably 2-hour meeting where we look at everything again before we teach it the next time. That collaborative piece is critical with our team. Here are some of the things. One of the questions on Ticket Out the Door is what could be improved, and this is in your handout on the questions we have on the Ticket Out the Door. These are just some of the pieces, and we made changes. The EDTPA we found was really stressful for the students. We hadn't back mapped that enough. And now we've taken some of these things and we've put them into some of the courses in preparation for the PD day. Changing up the groups throughout the day. We didn't actually change that one because we feel that it's important to be with one group for one PD day. The next PD day they will have a different group. So we don't change everything just because the students ask for it. More real-life scenarios, that was a big one for us. Our students are bringing their own real-life scenarios from their own classrooms that they're seeing every single day, but as faculty, we brought in some real-life scenarios where everyone could hear the same scenario and come up with some solutions as we go through the time. This feedback is not just from differentiation, this is compiled from all of our days. And then the second question was, what worked well for you? And so you can see how much they value their time with professors. We were encouraged by that. These are just 2 of the many that they shared, but that close small group time with a professor, that time with their peers to reflect with one another.
So as you can imagine, there's a number of challenges anytime you plan and create something like this. And I think one of the big challenges initially in the planning stages was finding common planning time. And even as we've implemented the days, we still have significant amounts of time that we have to meet to see how it went last semester, things we're going to change, things we might want to improve upon. So that is one of the big challenges, but we have met that challenge. We've always found time to meet and collaborate, because that's really a very important part of this. The second one, what that really is getting at is the fact that these professional development days end up being on different days based on the schedule throughout the semester. So what that means is we all teach our content course back here at the main campus, and so we have to sort of coordinate, like if depending on when the assessment day is, when the lesson planning professional development day is, we have to sort of coordinate and make some changes with what we're doing with our coursework back here in our regular content area courses. We've been able to meet that challenge, but it's something every semester we have to think about. The student workload issues, maybe one of the biggest ones, is in addition to doing all the work in their courses here, the 5 content courses here at Bethel, they also have to prepare for that, like Jay talked about with the flipped classroom component, and so they have to prepare for that in addition to the other homework and the coursework they're doing, so that's a challenge for the students. And finally, this is a challenge for both the faculty and the students, thinking about the fact that when we're in these PD days, some of the students are ready for the information, some aren't, depending on what they're seeing in the practicums, where they're at in the content courses. And so as faculty, we have to think about that as we bring in this information. And students also have to be aware of that as well. So it's something that both students and faculty have to face as a challenge.
All right, well, we broke up our advantages of the PD day into two different perspectives. The advantages from the faculty's point of view and the advantages from the student's perspective. One of the big advantages we had is the education department was part of a big Bush grant, the Twin Cities Teacher Collaborative Grant. And so we did have some funds to launch our vision, some monies to help us with planning and the curriculum mapping and all the backward design work and the preparation work that it took. We spent many, many hours coordinating and organizing this. Another advantage is the collaboration between colleagues. I think that has been an extreme privilege for me, and I can probably, you would all agree with that. Often we're siloed and we're teaching our own coursework in our own classrooms, and we don't have the chance to really maximize each other's strengths and pull from each other and lean on each other. Dan talked a little bit about this, but all of us, because we are teaching content methods coursework, we're all touching on assessment, lesson planning, and differentiation. And students were hearing it from 5 of us in their separate courses. And in this model, we are able to come together as a team and say, what are the key things that students need to hear from us in a unified way? And that really increased the efficiency with content, and we didn't feel like we were repeating ourselves in different places. Students really commented that they loved observing the co-teaching model that their professors were exhibiting and seeing that all of us were quite a great team and liking that each of us brought different strengths to the table. Students commented on how wonderful it felt to be a real teacher. They were getting up and going to Starbucks and coming all dressed and coming early to come and engage for the day, and they really felt like they were not a student, but they were really a professional, which was great for them. They liked how interactive and engaging it was once we put a few more breaks in the day for them. And students commented that they liked getting immediate feedback. So they were in a place, a safe environment where they could really question things and ask things and say, well, I'm confused by this, or what do you think about that? And I think there's such a community and a safe environment for them to just question the things that maybe they're wondering on their own, or they think about after class and then forget to bring up the next time we're together. So overall, very effective feedback from both parties and perspectives. Yeah.
All right, so do you have questions for us based on what you've learned from us today?
It would be interesting too, we've got actually primarily students here, but it'd be interesting to hear just kind of a general comment or an observation when you see it. I'm sure it feels kind of overwhelming, maybe a little bit confusing, that kind of thing, but just your quick take on it. Actually, all of our Block 2 students are out in schools right now, so none of them are here. But just kind of take from students as to what sounds, what sounds interesting about it, scary about it, so forth. Then we'll see if we go into some questions too. We're going to put you on the spot. You're going to be teachers, you have to talk in front of a lot of people.
I'll share with you one thing from one of our former students who's teaching right now, and I forgot to mention this earlier because I forgot to add the picture. But one of our teachers, who's a first-year teacher this year, she has taken it upon herself to upgrade her classroom. She's in a kindergarten classroom. She sought out donations from her school, and she has equipped her entire classroom for all of her students 3 or 4 different options on how they can sit and engage at their workstations. So she has kneeling pads, she has wobbly stools, she has 4 different kinds of tools that she was able to incorporate into her classroom because she believed in it. She didn't wait for the school to provide the money, she went out on and did it on her own, and we're not saying it's fully because of this, but she got to engage in this process right before she did that.
Okay, so student impressions and comments or questions.
Are you scared? Are you excited? Does it look? What do you think? Kelsey?
The idea of like the students or like us getting to watch you guys collaborate with each other, I think is something that's really beneficial because like when we go out with our teachers, we're going to be collaborating with other teachers, and it's not something that we get to see day to day. I know we have STEM with Professor President Swensen, so we see them collaborating, but just on a bigger level, it's something that's I think really cool.
I think one of the things we've learned about collaboration, you'll learn as a student too, but it's based on a couple things. One is to find out what in the world is your colleague even doing to begin with. And once you have better understanding of what your colleague is doing, it allows you to collaborate better because like Katie said, you can play off those, no, Geri said, you can play off those strengths, you've got someone you can talk to. And gaining that understanding of what one another does, what those strength areas are, even maybe what their gap areas are, is really helpful. The big thing for us, I think, was really building trust. And before you can really collaborate with somebody, you have to have some trust, you have to have respect for them, and that only comes by time. And for us, we've now been working together a number of years on this, and we're really comfortable with each other. We know where to go if we've got a question. When we talk, man, we throw out suggestions all over the place, but that has come through that kind of work, in collaboration. So it's a really critical part of what any teacher does now. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
The other piece with the collaboration, as you were responding to Kelsey, is that through this process, we've really been able to enhance our own courses that we teach in Block 2, in that we now know that, in technology they're doing this. I want to make sure I'm doing that at the same time in Ed Psych, or I can build off of what we're doing. So a lot of scaffolding has changed, I believe, for all of us. When we started doing this, because we start to build on things in a very different way because we know with the constant collaboration what is happening in every course, and not just because it's on paper, but because we've heard how it's happening in the classroom.
Other reactions, questions? Judy?
What surprised you? And for any of you, any of you, I don't mean.
The question was, what is surprises? I'll answer for myself, and then I'd like to hear from some others as well too. I think what surprised me was how much students actually like this. At the end of each one of these things, we do a Likert scale thing, and it's a 1 through 5 scale. When we get the feedback in from students, it's commonly in the 4.8, 4.9, even 5.0 category. And the students really, really work hard to prepare for these days. The days are tiring, but they're energizing. And just to see how positive the student response has been has really kind of surprised me a little bit. And it's been an enjoyable thing for them. So, I don't know, other thoughts?
I'll answer. I don't know if it's a surprise, but it's definitely an outcome that has been great. Is I think it really helps develop the relationships between the faculty and the students. So you're really building, you can do that in the classroom as well, the content methods courses, but for some reason this really is a venue that really helps take those relationships to a whole nother level as far as a professional, it's almost like your professional colleagues in a sense.
Just to hitchhike off on this as well. I think one of the things when you collaborate, the more you stand in just appreciation for your colleagues and what they're doing, and the sense of family within the Block 2 group gets very strong even at this point. But yesterday, one of our doctoral graduates was presenting a book he wrote for ASCD on new teacher attrition. And the surprising finding was that the biggest factor was the colleagues and the collegial support. So as we model that, and you think about the teams that you'll be with as teachers, and even us as faculty, as we have new faculty come in, I think it's very significant that that sense of community and that sense of belonging to a team gets communicated clearly. So that was a big aha to me.
I don't have anything different.
You've heard all of our wisdom now. That's kind of it. Another question, we can take a shot at it, or comment. We've got a couple minutes left to go here.
Just apology, Dan and I have to set up a lab.
Right. Yep. Okay. Anybody else? Well, we really appreciate you being here. You may not know it, but you kind of are our guinea pigs. So we're getting ready for our presentation in Las Vegas. The end of the presentation is quite different. We're going to run probably almost 30 minutes working with, these are all teacher educators we're speaking to from colleges and universities across the country. So we are then going to go into PLCs with them. We'll split up. They've got questions, and we're really trying to help them think through how this model might work in their institution. But for students, it's great to have you here, and you've got a little bit of a vision as to what's coming as you move into Block 2. If anybody has an individual question, feel free to come up and talk to any of us. But thanks a lot for being here. We appreciate it.